What if a single glance across a crowded room could shatter your entire world? For Henry Bryan. A man who had everything. It was a look of disdain he shot at a young waitress. He judged her, mocked her, and dismissed her. But he was wrong. He didn't know she was fighting a silent battle, sacrificing her youth to feed her orphaned siblings. He was about to learn that the poorest person at the gala was actually the richest in ways his money could never buy. The chandeliers of the Astoria Grand Ballroom dripped with crystals, each one a frozen teardrop of extravagant light, casting a golden, forgiving glow upon the city's elite. It was the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala, the undisputed pinnacle of New York City's philanthropic calendar. Here, fortunes were pledged on the strength of a handshake, and reputations were forged in the glint of a champagne flute. For Henry Bryan, this was his natural habitat, a gilded cage he both commanded and despised. At 34, Henry was the kind of man lesser men feared and women watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He had inherited a real estate empire from his father. But unlike many scions of old money, he had not merely sat on the throne. He had rebuilt it, expanding Bryan Holdings into an international behemoth. His face, all sharp angles and piercing blue eyes, was a regular feature in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Tonight, he wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, a garment that cost more than most people's cars. Yet, he moved with a restless energy. A shark circling in a diamond-studded aquarium. Another $1 million for the children's wing. His associate, Marcus Thorne, murmured beside him. A portly man whose joviality was a carefully constructed business asset. "You're in a generous mood tonight, Henry." Henry took a slow sip of his Macallan 25. The amber liquid a familiar comfort. "It's an investment, Marcus. Good press is the cheapest marketing there is." He scanned the room, his gaze dismissive. He saw the same faces, the same practiced smiles, the same desperate dance of social climbing. It was all a game, and he was its master. That's when he saw her. She was a waitress, one of the dozens of anonymous figures hired to keep the river of champagne and canapés flowing. But she stood out. Not because of any overt beauty, though she was pretty in a fragile, unassuming way, but because of the stain. A dark crimson blotch of what looked like red wine was spreading across the pristine white cuff of her uniform blouse. Her back was to him as she hastily dabbed at it with a napkin, her movements small and frantic, clearly hoping not to be noticed. A smirk touched Henry's lips. It was a small imperfection in his perfectly curated world, and it annoyed him. He nudged Marcus. "Look at that. You'd think for the price of these tickets, the Blackwood Foundation could hire staff who don't spill the profits on themselves." Marcus chuckled. A sycophantic rumble. "Perhaps she's new to the circuit." The girl turned then, her face pale, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of embarrassment and anxiety. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair, a simple brown ponytail, was slightly disheveled, a few stray strands clinging to her flushed cheek. She looked exhausted, her youthful features pulled taut with a stress that seemed out of place amid such opulent carelessness. As she moved to collect empty glasses from a nearby table, her path intersected with Henry's. She kept her head down, her focus entirely on the tray in her hands. This was the moment. Henry's boredom and casual cruelty coalesced. As she passed, He extended his foot just slightly. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement. Her shoe caught the tip of his polished leather loafer. It wasn't enough to make her fall. But it was enough to send the carefully balanced glasses on her tray into a clattering, chaotic symphony of destruction. Crystal shattered on the marble floor. The sharp, alcoholic scent of spilled champagne filled the air. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Heads turned. The music seemed to stutter. The girl froze, her face draining of all color. She stood amidst the glittering debris, her hands trembling as she stared at the mess. It was a disaster. A spotlight of failure shining directly on her. Henry looked down at the wreckage, then up at her. His expression one of pure, unadulterated disdain. "Careful," he said, his voice low and sharp, yet carrying easily in the sudden hush. "These are baccarat glasses. Each one is probably worth more than your entire week's salary." The girl's head snapped up, her dark eyes meeting his. For a second, he saw something flash in their depths, not just fear, but a flicker of defiance. A spark of wounded pride. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. She just swallowed. A visible, painful effort. "My sincerest apologies, Mr. Bryan," a harried-looking catering manager said, rushing over with a dustpan and brush. "It won't happen again. Maria, go to the back. Now." The girl, Maria, gave Henry one last lingering look before turning and all but fleeing, disappearing through a service door. Henry watched her go. A fleeting, unfamiliar pang striking him. He dismissed it as annoyance. He had made his point. The world was orderly again. "Quite the scene," Marcus said, sipping his own drink. "She was clumsy," Henry replied, his tone final. He turned his attention back to the gala, to the world of deals and power, effortlessly dismissing the waitress from his mind. He had already forgotten her name. The small, cruel act was nothing more than a momentary diversion. A ripple in the vast ocean of his wealth and influence. He couldn't know, not then, that the ripple was destined to become a tidal wave. One that would crash upon the shores of his carefully constructed life and wash it all away. For Henry Bryan, the rest of the evening unfolded as expected. He pledged another $500,000 during the live auction for a walk-on role in a Martin Scorsese film, a prize he had no intention of ever claiming but knew would generate the right kind of buzz. He glad-handed a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley, laying the groundwork for a potential merger. He charmed the wife of a powerful senator, his smile a well-honed tool of influence. He was a master puppeteer, and the gala was his stage. Yet, intermittently, an image would flicker at the edge of his consciousness, the face of the waitress. The shame in her eyes, quickly masked by that brief, surprising flare of defiance. It was a dissonant note in the symphony of his success. And it irritated him more than he cared to admit. He was used to people fawning over him, fearing him, or wanting something from him. He was not used to being looked at with such raw, unfiltered humanity. "You seem distracted," Marcus noted as they stood on the Astoria's grand terrace. The glittering skyline of Manhattan spread before them like a carpet of scattered diamonds. "Just thinking about the quarterly projections." Henry lied smoothly. The European market is softer than I'd like. It was an easy deflection. A language Marcus understood. The conversation shifted back to leveraged assets and acquisitions. The girl, Maria, was relegated to a forgotten footnote. A ghost in a white blouse with a wine-stained cuff. By the time his driver, a stoic man named Thomas, pulled the gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom up to the curb, Henry's mind was already in a boardroom 3,000 miles away, mentally dissecting a competitor's weaknesses. His penthouse on Park Avenue was a monument to minimalist wealth. It was less a home and more a gallery. With stark white walls, museum-quality art, and vast windows that offered breathtaking, impersonal views of the city. There were no family photos. No sentimental trinkets. No clutter of a life lived. It was sterile, silent, and exactly how he liked it. It was a fortress designed to keep the messiness of the world at bay. As he undressed, dropping the expensive tuxedo onto a valet stand, he caught his reflection in a full-length mirror. He saw the power, the success, the man who had everything. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he also saw a profound and unsettling emptiness staring back at him. The thrill of the deal, the dopamine hit of the gala, had already faded, leaving behind a familiar, metallic taste of nothingness. He shook his head, dismissing the feeling as fatigue, and poured himself another scotch before heading to bed, where his dreams were filled with stock tickers and empty hallways. For Isabella Rossi, the girl Henry knew only as Maria, the night was far from over. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Henderson, had read her the riot act in the cramped, chaotic heat of the kitchen. "Do you have any idea who that was, Maria?" he'd hissed, his voice a furious whisper over the clang of pots and the shouts of chefs. That was Henry Bryan. The Henry Bryan. A single phone call from him and this entire catering company goes under. One glass he mocked you for is worth more than your rent. It was an accident, she'd mumbled, her cheeks burning with shame. He tripped me. He tripped you. Henderson had scoffed, his disbelief a slap in the face. A man like that doesn't trip people. He walks, and the world gets out of his way. You were clumsy and you were careless. You're lucky I'm not firing you on the spot. Now get back out there. And for God's sake, be invisible. She had been docked the cost of the broken glasses from her pay. A sum that made her stomach clench with a cold, hard knot of dread. It was money she didn't have. It was food off the table. She wasn't Maria. Her name was Isabella. She used a different name for agency work. A small, futile attempt to create a barrier between her real life and this one. After the gala ended and the last of the wealthy patrons had floated away on a cloud of perfume and privilege, she stayed for another 2 hours, scrubbing floors and polishing silverware, her body aching with a weariness that went bone deep. Finally, just before 3 a.m., she was released. She swapped her stained uniform for her own worn jeans and a thin hoodie. The crisp night air of the city felt good on her hot face. But the journey home was a long one. She couldn't afford a taxi. Not even an Uber. Her trip involved a brisk walk to the subway station. A long, rattling ride on the downtown train. And then another 10-block walk through a neighborhood that bore no resemblance to the one she had just left. Here. The streets were not lined with gleaming towers and designer storefronts, but with bodegas secured by heavy metal grates, laundromats buzzing under fluorescent lights, and apartment buildings hunched together like tired old men. The air smelled not of expensive perfume, but of garbage and grilled onions. This was her world. This was her reality. As she walked, her mind raced. The docked pay was a disaster. She did the mental arithmetic, reallocating her meager budget. The electric bill could probably wait another week. She could water down the soup for a few more days. Maybe Mrs. Garcia next door would have some extra bread. The anxiety was a physical thing. A tight band around her chest. She finally reached her building. A 5-story walk-up with crumbling brickwork and a flickering light above the entrance. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs. Each step a monumental effort. Her key scraped in the lock and she pushed the door open. Stepping into the small, cluttered apartment with the practiced silence of a cat. The living room was dark, but a sliver of moonlight cut through a gap in the curtains, illuminating the scene within. On the lumpy hand-me-down sofa, a small boy of about 7 was curled up, his breathing soft and even. This was Leo. On a mattress on the floor beside him, a little girl, maybe 5, was sprawled out, one arm flung over her head. This was Sophia. A wave of love so fierce and powerful it momentarily eclipsed her exhaustion washed over Isabella. They were the reason for everything. The reason for the long hours. The humiliation. The aching feet. And the constant, gnawing worry. She tiptoed past them into the tiny, galley-style kitchen. On the counter sat a small, slightly lopsided birthday cake with 3 unlit candles. A handmade card decorated with crayon stick figures lay beside it. It was Sophia's birthday tomorrow. No. She realized with a jolt. It was Sophia's birthday today. She had missed midnight. A tear, hot and heavy, escaped and tracked a path through the grime on her cheek. She had promised Sophia she would be home to kiss her good night on her birthday. She had failed. She opened the fridge. It was heartbreakingly bare. A carton of milk. A few eggs. A wilted head of lettuce. And a container of leftover pasta. The money she'd lost tonight was supposed to be for groceries and a small, second-hand bicycle she'd seen at a pawn shop, the one Sophia visited every day. Her small face pressed against the glass, sinking onto a wobbly kitchen chair. Isabella buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. In the heart of the city that never sleeps, 2 worlds existed in parallel. In a penthouse miles away, a millionaire slept in an empty king-sized bed, oblivious and untouched. And in a cramped apartment, a young woman wept for a broken promise and the crushing weight of a life she never chose, but one she would die to protect. The days following the gala were a blur of high-stakes negotiations and strategic power plays for Henry. He finalized the acquisition of a rival firm. A ruthless corporate maneuver that earned him a headline in the Financial Times and the private curses of hundreds of newly unemployed workers. He attended board meetings where his presence cast a chilling silence over the room. His questions precise and unforgiving. He was a machine of commerce. Efficient and seemingly devoid of sentiment. Yet, the machine had a glitch. At odd moments signing a multi-million-dollar contract. Staring out at the city from his corner office, the image of the waitress, Maria, would surface. He'd see her pale, stricken face in the reflection of his polished mahogany desk. Her dark, accusing eyes staring back at him from the depths of his morning espresso. It was illogical. This lingering ghost of a nobody. He had metaphorically crushed people far more important than her without a second thought. Why did this one insignificant girl haunt him? He decided it was the defiance. That fleeting spark in her eyes before she fled was an anomaly. An unexpected variable in an otherwise predictable equation. It was a debt unpaid. A loose thread in the perfect tapestry of his control. A week after the gala, he was in a meeting with his legal team, discussing the final details of a hostile takeover. His lead counsel, a sharp, impeccably dressed woman named Evelyn Reed, was presenting a slideshow on shareholder liabilities. But Henry wasn't listening. He was staring out the panoramic window, his mind replaying the clatter and smash of baccarat crystal on marble. Henry. Evelyn's voice, crisp and professional, cut through his reverie. Is there an issue with the proposal? The entire room, filled with six-figure lawyers, turned to him. Henry swiveled his chair away from the window. Evelyn, he began, his voice quiet but commanding. Do you know the name of the catering company from the Blackwood Gala? The question was so out of left field that it momentarily threw the entire room off balance. Lawyers exchanged confused glances. Evelyn, ever the professional, recovered instantly. Prestige Catering. I believe, she said, her expression unreadable. Why do you ask? There was a waitress. Clumsy girl. Spilled a tray, he said. His tone clipped and dismissive, a performance for the room. I want to know what happened to her. A junior associate, a young man named Daniel Chen, saw his moment. I can make a call. Mr. Brian. Find out for you right away. Do it. Henry commanded. Then turned his attention back to the meeting as if nothing had happened. Continue. Evelyn. The gears of the Brian Holdings machine turned. A few hours later, a sleek email landed in Henry's inbox. Subject, Prestige Catering Inquiry. Mr. Brian. Per your request, we contacted Prestige Catering regarding the incident at the Blackwood Gala. The waitress in question, who was working under the name Maria Sanchez, was a temporary hire through an external agency called First Class Staffing. Her wages for the evening were docked to cover the cost of the broken glassware, $450. According to her catering manager, she was reprimanded but not terminated. However, we also contacted First Class Staffing. They reported that she has not checked in or accepted another shift since the event. Her file lists her real name as Isabella Rossi. Regards. Daniel Chen. Jr. Associate. Brian Holdings Legal. He read the email twice. Isabella Rossi. The name felt more real than Maria. Has not taken another shift. A flicker of something satisfaction. Guilt. Stirred within him. He had made his point so effectively that he had cost a girl. Isabella. A job she clearly needed. He should have felt powerful. Instead, he just felt empty. The ghost remained. And now it had a name. That evening, driven by an impulse he didn't fully understand, He did something he hadn't done in years. He bypassed his driver and took one of his own cars. A matte black Aston Martin DB11. Out of the climate-controlled garage himself. He drove without a destination. The city lights blurring into streaks of neon. He found himself in parts of the city he only ever saw from his penthouse window, vibrant. Chaotic neighborhoods teeming with a life that felt a world away from his own. He was a tourist in his own city. And he hated it. The noise. The smells. The sheer, unadulterated mess of it all grated on his nerves. He was about to turn back when he saw it, a small, brightly lit pawn shop on a corner. And in the window, displayed under a buzzing fluorescent light, was a small, slightly rusted pink bicycle with training wheels. And standing there, her small hands pressed flat against the glass, was a little girl with big, dark eyes. Beside her, holding her hand, was the waitress from the Gala, Isabella Rossi. He pulled the Aston Martin over to the opposite curb, parking in a tow-away zone without a second thought, and killed the engine. He watched them, unseen in the tinted privacy of his luxury car. Isabella was talking to the little girl, her expression a mixture of love and sorrow. The girl, who he now saw was the spitting image of Isabella, pointed emphatically at the bike, her face alight with a pure, uncontainable joy that Henry couldn't remember ever feeling. Isabella knelt, her face level with the child's. He couldn't hear their words, but he could read the narrative in her posture. He saw her smile, a sad, loving smile. He saw her shake her head gently. He saw the little girl's face fall, the bright light of joy dimming into a heartbreaking cloud of disappointment. Isabella pulled her into a tight, protective hug, rocking her gently on the sidewalk. And Henry Bryan, the man who moved markets and toppled empires, felt a crack appear in the foundation of his world. This wasn't a clumsy waitress. This was a woman, a sister, trying to manage a child's dreams on a budget that he had personally, carelessly shattered over a moment of pique. He watched as she took the little girl's hand, and they walked away, disappearing into the entrance of a rundown brick apartment building next door. He stayed in his car for a long time, the engine silent, the city's vibrant chaos muted behind the glass. The ghost of the waitress finally had a name, a face, and a story. And for the first time, Henry Bryan felt the chilling premonition that this story was now inexplicably tangled up with his own. Henry did not sleep that night. The image of the little girl's crestfallen face was seared into his mind. The sterile luxury of his penthouse felt oppressive, its silence amplifying the hollowness inside him. This wasn't about a clumsy waitress anymore. This was about a bicycle, a child's disappointment, and the dawning, uncomfortable realization of his own casual cruelty. The next morning, he called Daniel Chen into his office. The young lawyer entered with a nervous energy, clutching a tablet to his chest. Mr. Bryan. Henry was standing by the window, his back to the room. Isabella Rossi, he said without turning around. I want to know everything about her. Where she lives, her family situation, her financial status. Everything. He finally turned, his blue eyes sharp and intense. And Daniel, this is to be handled with absolute discretion. No one else is to know. You report only to me. Understood? Yes. Mr. Brian. Absolutely. Use any resources you need. Henry added. But I want the information yesterday. Daniel Chen, sensing a career-defining moment, practically flew out of the office. He was a hungry, ambitious young man. And he understood the unspoken command, deliver. And you will be rewarded. Fail. And you will cease to exist at Brian Holdings. For the next 48 hours. Henry went through the motions of his life. But his focus was elsewhere. He was waiting. The billion-dollar deals and corporate strategies felt like a charade. The real world, it seemed, was happening in a rundown apartment building miles away. Finally, a secured, encrypted file arrived in his inbox from Daniel. Henry locked his office door and opened it. The file was titled simply, I. Rossi. He began to read. And with each line, another layer of the onion was peeled back, revealing a story of tragedy and resilience that made his own privileged life seem like a hollow fiction. Isabella Rossi. Age 20. Her parents, Marco and Elena Rossi, were Italian immigrants who had run a small, beloved bakery in the neighborhood for 15 years. They were, by all accounts, hard-working, loving people. 3 years ago, on their way home from a late-night catering gig they were taking to save for a bigger space, their car had been hit by a drunk driver. Both were killed instantly. Isabella, then 17, had been left as the sole guardian of her two younger siblings, Leonardo, now 7, and Sophia, who had just turned 5. There were no other relatives in the country. Social services had wanted to put the children into the foster care system. Isabella had refused. She had fought. She had gone to court, emancipated herself, and petitioned for legal guardianship. To do so, she had to drop out of her freshman year at Hunter College, where she had been studying to be a teacher on a partial scholarship. She had sold the family's modest home to pay off her parents' debts and the legal fees, moving them into the small, rent-controlled apartment where they now lived. The report was meticulous. It detailed her work history, a string of low-wage jobs from stocking shelves at a grocery store to cleaning offices at night. She took whatever work she could get, often juggling 2 or 3 jobs at a time. The agency work, like the Gala, paid better, but it was inconsistent. Then came the financials. It was a bleak landscape of late notices and mounting debt. Rent, utilities, food, clothing for 2 growing children. There was a small life insurance payout from her parents, but that had been exhausted within the first year. The report included a scanned copy of a recent hospital bill for Leo, who had severe asthma. The cost of his inhalers was a constant, crippling expense. Henry felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. The $450 he had so casually cost her wasn't just a dent in her budget. It was a gaping wound. It was the difference between keeping the lights on and receiving a final notice. It was a week's worth of groceries. It was Leo's medication. He clicked on the final attachment. A folder of photographs. They were clearly taken from a distance. Grainy surveillance shots. One showed Isabella walking Leo and Sophia to school, her hand holding theirs protectively. Another showed her at a laundromat, patiently folding clothes while the children did their homework at a small plastic table. The last photo was the one that broke him. It was of Isabella sitting alone on a park bench after she dropped the kids at school. She was staring into the distance. And on her face was a look of such profound, soul-crushing exhaustion that it took Henry's breath away. This was not the defiant girl from the Gala. This was a young woman carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, fighting a desperate, lonely war to keep her family together. He, Henry Bryan, had walked onto her battlefield, mistaken her for a casualty of his own boredom, and fired a shot without a second thought. He closed the file, his hands trembling slightly. The emptiness he'd been feeling for years suddenly had a name: shame. It was a foreign, acrid taste in his mouth. He had built an empire on the principle of control, of knowing every variable. But he had known nothing. He was a powerful man, a king in his own world. But he realized with sickening clarity that in the face of Isabella Rossi's quiet, desperate courage, he was nothing but a spoiled, petty child. He stood up and walked back to the window. The city sprawled before him, a kingdom of glass and steel he had conquered. But he wasn't looking at the landmarks or the symbols of his power anymore. He was looking down at the anonymous streets, wondering which one Isabella was walking on right now. The glitch in the machine had become a system-wide failure. The ghost had become flesh and blood. And Henry Bryan knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had to do something. The question was, what? The information acted as a catalyst within Henry, transforming his vague sense of guilt into a sharp, undeniable imperative. For the first time in his adult life, his actions were not being guided by profit margins or strategic advantage, but by a powerful, unfamiliar moral compass. He, who had always been the wrecker of worlds, felt an overwhelming urge to build one up. But how? A simple apology felt laughably inadequate. Walking up to her and handing her a check would be a gross insult. Another act of a rich man throwing money at a problem to make it disappear. It would reinforce the very power dynamic he now found so repulsive. He had been cruel with precision. His atonement had to be equally precise. But with kindness. He needed to be an architect, not a demolition man. He spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed exile in his penthouse, canceling meetings and ignoring calls from an increasingly frantic Marcus Thorne. He had Daniel Chen's report open on his laptop, studying the details of Isabella's life as if it were a hostile company's portfolio, searching for vulnerabilities not to exploit, but to fortify. He saw the asthma, the dropped scholarship, the defunct bakery. These were not just problems. They were entry points. He began to formulate a plan. A multi-pronged strategy that was as complex and ambitious as any corporate takeover he had ever orchestrated. His first call was to Dr. Alistair Finch, the most renowned pediatric pulmonologist in the country, whose new state-of-the-art research wing at Mount Sinai Hospital had been funded by a 7-figure anonymous donation from the Bryan Foundation 2 years prior. Alistair. It's Henry Bryan. Henry. To what do I owe the pleasure? Finch's voice was warm. Don't tell me you're planning on funding another wing already. Something more specific. Henry said. I have a case for you. A 7-year-old boy named Leonardo Rossi. Severe asthma. I'm sending you his file. I want him to have the best care in the world. The absolute best. All expenses treatments. Medications. Everything will be covered by a new discretionary fund I'm establishing at the hospital. Anonymously. Of course. Henry. Consider it done. We'll reach out to the family and say he's been selected for a new pediatric care grant. Excellent. Henry said. And Alistair. He needs to be treated like a prince. Next. He called the dean of Hunter College. A woman he'd met at a fundraiser. He re-established Isabella's scholarship, paying for all 4 years in advance through another anonymous grant. This one for promising students forced to delay their education due to family hardship. He also stipulated that the grant should include a generous stipend for living expenses and childcare. The college was more than happy to rediscover a promising former student and offer her a full ride to return. The bakery was the most complex piece of the puzzle. It was a ghost of a life Isabella's parents had built. Bringing it back wouldn't just be about money. It would be about restoring a legacy. He dispatched a team from his real estate division, not lawyers this time, but architects and designers. Their mission: find the original location of Rossi's Dolce Vita bakery. He learned it was now a failing vape shop. Within 24 hours, the owner of the vape shop received an offer to buy him out of his lease that was so ridiculously generous. He thought it was a prank call. He accepted on the spot. Henry then hired a top restaurant consulting firm. I want you to recreate an authentic Italian bakery, he told the lead consultant. A chic, no-nonsense woman named Chloe. The best equipment. The finest ingredients. I've seen photos of the original place. I want its heart, its soul, but with a modern, sustainable business model. Hire staff. Create a management structure. And find a way to offer the former owner's daughter a position as an artisan apprentice and manager in training, with a salary that reflects her ownership stake. Ownership? Chloe asked, raising an eyebrow. The entire business will be placed into a trust, Henry explained, his plan now fully formed. A trust that will become the legal property of Isabella Rossi and her siblings. She won't manage a bakery. She will own it. But she needs to believe she's earning it. The offer has to come from you. From the consulting firm. As if you're a third-party investor looking to revive a community institution. It was a brilliant, intricate web of philanthropy and deception. He was creating a safety net of opportunities around Isabella. A world where her hard work would finally be rewarded. Where the universe wasn't conspiring against her, but for her. He was rigging the game. But this time, he was rigging it in her favor. Each step was executed through layers of trusts, foundations, and third parties, erasing his fingerprints from the operation. The name, Henry Bryan, was nowhere to be found. He was a ghost in this machine. Too. But a benevolent one. The final piece was the bicycle. It was the smallest, most personal part of the plan, and the only one he chose to handle himself. He drove the Aston Martin back to the pawn shop. The sleek supercar looking absurdly out of place on the gritty street. He walked in. The bell above the door announcing his presence. The shop was cluttered and smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. The pink bicycle was in the corner. How much for the bike? Henry asked the balding man behind the counter. The owner looked Henry's expensive suit up and down. A greedy glint in his eye. For you. A collector's item. $100. Henry knew it was worth 20 at most. He didn't bargain. He pulled out $200 bills from his wallet. I'll give you 200. He said. On one condition. You take it out of the window and put a "sold" sign on it. If a young woman and her little girl come asking about it, you tell them it was bought and paid for and it's waiting to be picked up. Their name is Rossi. The pawnbroker stared at him, bewildered. You're just leaving it for them? Consider it an anonymous gift, Henry said, his voice flat. He turned and walked out of the shop, the bell tinkling behind him. As he drove away, he felt a strange sense of lightness. For years, his power had been a weapon used to intimidate, acquire, and dominate. Now, for the first time, he had used it to heal, to build, to redeem. It was a foreign feeling. This quiet, constructive satisfaction. It was better than any hostile takeover. It was, he realized with a jolt, the best deal he had ever made. For Isabella. The first sign that the universe had tilted on its axis came in the form of a small, handwritten note taped to the pawn shop window. She and the kids had been walking home from the park when Sophia, as she always did, made a beeline for the window. Her daily ritual of hope. But this time, the bicycle was gone. In its place was the note. Sophia's face began to crumple. The familiar prelude to tears. "See me, amor," Isabella began, gently preparing to console her. "I told you someone might." But then she saw the "sold" sign. And beneath it, another sign taped to the glass. It read, "Reserved for pickup, Rossi." Isabella blinked. She read it again. It had to be a mistake. Another Rossi family. It was impossible. Heart-hammering. She pushed open the shop door, the kids trailing behind her. The owner, a man she'd only ever seen scowl, gave her a surprisingly gentle look. "You Rossi?" he asked. "Yes," she stammered. "Isabella Rossi. Got a bike for ya. Paid in full. A gift from an anonymous friend," he said. He wheeled the little pink bicycle out from the back. It was even shinier up close. Sophia let out a squeal of such pure, unadulterated ecstasy that it echoed in the dusty shop. She ran to the bike, hugging it as if it were a long-lost pet. Isabella stared at the shop owner, her mind reeling. "Anonymous? I don't understand." "Lady, I just sell the stuff," the man said with a shrug. "All I know is some fella in a fancy suit came in, paid double, and said to hold it for you. Congratulations, kid." Tears streamed down Isabella's face. But for the first time in a long time, they were tears of bewildered joy. That night, Leo and Isabella taught Sophia how to ride on the cracked pavement behind their building, her delighted shrieks filling the evening air. For a few hours, they were just a normal family, their world brightened by an inexplicable act of kindness. But it was only the beginning. 2 days later, a thick, official-looking envelope arrived from Mount Sinai Hospital. Isabella opened it with trembling hands, fearing it was another bill. Instead, it was a letter informing her that Leonardo Rossi had been selected to receive the New Horizons pediatric grant, covering all costs associated with his asthma treatment, including medication and regular specialist visits for the next 10 years. An appointment with the renowned Dr. Alistair Finch had already been scheduled for him. Isabella sat down hard on her lumpy sofa, the letter shaking in her hand. This was a miracle. A life-changing, prayer-answering miracle. The constant, crushing weight of worry about Leo's health, about the cost of his next inhaler, lifted from her shoulders in an instant. Then came the letter from Hunter College. It spoke of a new grant, the Second Chance Scholarship. It detailed how her academic record had been reviewed and they were formally offering her a full scholarship to complete her degree, along with a monthly stipend that was, to her astonishment, more than she was currently making from 2 jobs. Isabella felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. It was too much. Too many good things happening at once. It felt like a dream she was terrified to wake up from. Who was doing this? This guardian angel. This invisible benefactor orchestrating these miracles. She had no rich relatives. No secret admirers she knew of. It made no sense. The final, most unbelievable piece fell into place the following week. She received a call from a woman named Chloe, a consultant from a hospitality investment firm. She spoke about a project to revitalize neighborhood institutions. She spoke of a beloved local business, Rossi's Dolce Vita Bakery. We've acquired the lease to the original location, Chloe explained, her voice professional and warm. We're investing heavily to bring it back, to make it a cornerstone of the community again. We have the capital, the business plan. But we're missing one thing. The heart. We're missing a Rossi. Chloe offered her a job. Not as a cashier, but as an apprentice manager and artisan in training. The salary she quoted was so generous it made Isabella gasp. And then came the part that made her knees weak. The investment group I represent believes in community ownership, Chloe said smoothly. The entire business will be held in a trust. After a 2-year probationary period where we guide you, the bakery its assets, everything will become the property of you and your siblings. We want to restore your family's legacy. Isabella. Isabella was speechless. She was sobbing into the phone, trying to form words, trying to ask who, why, how. We believe in you, Isabella. Chloe said gently. We believe in your family's story. From his office, Henry watched it all unfold through Daniel Chen's discreet reports. He read about Sophia learning to ride her new bike. He saw the report from Dr. Finch detailing Leo's new, comprehensive treatment plan. He received a notification from Hunter College that Isabella Rossi had officially re-enrolled. He read the signed contract from the consulting firm, confirming Isabella's acceptance of the bakery position. He had remade her world from the shadows. A benevolent God playing with the lives of mortals. He had fixed everything. He had paid his debt. But it wasn't enough. The shame was gone, replaced by a deep, aching curiosity. He knew everything about her life. But he didn't know her. He had orchestrated her happiness. But he had never seen it. He had only seen her exhaustion, her fear, her disappointment. He found himself wanting, with a desperation that surprised him, to see her smile. Not the sad, gentle smile he'd seen on the street, but a real, genuine smile of happiness. A smile he had helped create. The architect of her redemption had one final, fatal flaw in his design. He had written himself out of the story. And now, he wanted back in. The new Rossi's Dolce Vita bakery was a triumph. Henry's team had perfectly blended rustic charm with modern elegance. The air inside smelled of warm bread, roasted coffee, and melting sugar, the scent of happiness. Through discreet channels, Henry learned that Isabella was a natural. She had her parents' touch, an innate understanding of dough and flavor. More than that, she had a warmth and grace that made customers feel like family. The bakery was thriving, not just as a business, but as a community hub. Henry found himself drawn to the neighborhood, a place he once would have disdained. He'd park his car blocks away and walk, wearing simple, casual clothes, a ghost observing his own creation. He'd stand across the street, watching as Isabella, wearing a flour-dusted apron, laughed with a customer. He saw Leo and Sophia come in after school, their faces bright and healthy, grabbing cookies from the counter. He saw the family he had almost broken, now whole and happy, and it filled him with a profound sense of peace he had never known. But it was coupled with a profound loneliness. He was the architect of this beautiful world, and he wasn't allowed inside. He knew he had to see her, to speak to her, not as a benefactor, not as a king bestowing gifts, but just as a man. It was the riskiest move of all. He could shatter the perfect illusion he had so carefully constructed. He chose a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when the bakery would be quiet. He walked in, the bell above the door chiming softly. Isabella was behind the counter, wiping it down, her back to him. "Be right with you," she called out cheerfully, without turning around. "Take your time," Henry said. His voice, it was low and quiet, but it cut through the cozy atmosphere of the shop like a shard of ice. Isabella froze. The cloth in her hand went still. Slowly, she turned around. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. It was him. The man from the Gala. The man with the cruel eyes and the devastating words. He looked different now, without the tuxedo and the armor of arrogance. But he was unmistakable. All the warmth vanished from the room. She stood there, silent, her expression a mixture of shock, fear, and a deep, simmering anger. All the anonymous kindness, all the miracles of the past few weeks, suddenly felt tainted, sinister. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Hello, Isabella," Henry said softly. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice gaining a hard, protective edge. "Have you come to mock the decor? Tell me my cannoli are worth less than your shoes." The words stung, as they were meant to. "No," he said, his gaze unwavering. "I came to apologize." "Apologize?" She let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's a little late for that. I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I want you to leave. Now." "The bike," he said, taking a step closer. "The hospital grant. The scholarship. The bakery. It was you, wasn't it? All of it." The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. The miracles weren't from a guardian angel. They were from him. It felt like charity. Like a rich man's gilt money. And it cheapened everything. Yes. He admitted quietly. Why? She demanded. Her voice rising. To clear your conscience. To buy your way into heaven after a lifetime of being a monster. Do you have any idea what you did to me? Not just that night. But the years of struggle. You think you can just wave your magic money wand and fix it all? No. He said. And for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't disdain or power. It was vulnerability. It was regret. I can't fix it. I can never undo my arrogance. My cruelty. That night, I behaved despicably. There is no excuse. But seeing you, learning about you, it changed something in me. It showed me what a bankrupt man I truly was. He looked around the beautiful bakery. At the life she had built. I didn't do this to clear my conscience. Isabella. I did it because you and your family deserved a world that didn't fight you at every turn. You deserved a foundation to build on, the one your parents wanted for you. The one you were fighting so hard to create on your own. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single folded document. He placed it on the counter between them. This is the last piece. The final transaction. She looked at him. Confused. And then down at the paper. It was the deed and trust documents for the bakery. All legally processed. But there was a new signature clause, a transfer of all controlling interest from the anonymous trust to a single name, Isabella Rossi. His name. And the labyrinth of trusts he had created. Were completely erased. It's all yours. He said. Free and clear. No strings attached. No connection to me whatsoever. My name is gone. I had to tell you myself. I had to look you in the eye and say that I am truly, deeply sorry for what I did. Isabella stared at the papers. Then back at his face. She saw no deceit. No hidden agenda. She saw only a man stripped bare of his power. Offering the only thing he had left to give, the truth. The anger within her began to recede. Replaced by a complex, bewildering wave of emotion. He had been a monster. But he had also been her angel. He had wounded her. But he had also healed her in ways she never dreamed possible. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Her voice barely a whisper. You could have just stayed a ghost. A sad smile touched Henry's lips. Because I learned that fixing things from a distance isn't enough. And because I think I needed you to know that the man who mocked you at the gala is not the man who is standing here today. You did that. You changed me. He turned to leave. His shoulders slumped as if the confession had taken all his strength. He had done what he came to do. He had handed her back her life. Untainted by his name. Wait. She called out. Her voice stronger now. He stopped. His hand on the door. And turned back to her. Isabella looked around her beautiful bakery. At the legacy her parents had started and that she was now continuing. She looked at the deed. The symbol of her future. Her freedom. Then she looked at the man who had given it all to her. He was right. This was a different man. Would you, she began. Her heart beating a new, uncertain rhythm. Would you like a cup of coffee? Henry. Henry Bryan stared at her. A flicker of disbelief and then a dawning. Radiant hope in his eyes. A real, Genuine smile, the one he had longed to see slowly spread across Isabella's face. It was an offer of forgiveness. It was an offer of a new beginning. It was the final and most valuable transaction of all. And for the first time, Henry Bryan felt truly rich. Isabella and Henry's story shows us that a single moment of judgment can be a mistake. But a single act of redemption can change a life. Their journey wasn't just about money. It was about seeing the humanity in each other, beyond class and circumstance. It reminds us that behind every face, there is a story of struggle and strength. If their story moved you, please hit the like button to spread this message of hope and second chances. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas that touch the heart. What did you think of Henry's transformation? Let us know in the comments below.